The sharp buzz of Marina's phone shattered the fragile stillness of her small apartment, making her jump. She was in the middle of coaxing her 7-year-old daughter, Dacha, into an afternoon nap, her hands gently smoothing the blanket over the restless child. Dacha, sensing her mother's sudden unease, stirred and let out a soft whimper, her small face scrunching in protest. Marina sighed, her shoulders sagging under the weight of exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She murmured soothing words to Dacha, brushing a damp curl from the girl's forehead, before slipping out of the room to answer the call. The name glowing on the screen sent a familiar jolt of dread through her. Nina Vasilievna, her mother-in-law. Yes, Nina Vasilievna, Marina said, forcing her voice to carry a warmth she didn't feel. Her fingers tightened around the phone, bracing for whatever was coming. Marinochka, hello. Nina Vasilievna's voice oozed with a cloying sweetness that always made Marina's skin prickle. How are you all holding up? Everyone alive and well, I hope? Thank God we're fine, Marina replied, her mind already racing to decipher the purpose of the call. Nina Vasilievna never rang just to chat. Her calls were calculated, always leading to some demand or expectation. Wonderful, simply wonderful, Nina Vasilievna drawled, her tone laced with a faint condescension that Marina had learned to recognize over the years. You know, I was thinking, it's been far too long since we had a proper family gathering. I'd love for everyone to come to the Dacha this weekend. We'll fire up the grill, make some shashlik, enjoy the fresh air. Doesn't that sound lovely? Marina's heart sank, a cold knot tightening in her chest. A trip to Nina Vasilievna's dacha was never the idyllic retreat her mother-in-law painted it to be. It was a grueling ordeal of endless cooking, cleaning, and serving, punctuated by subtle and not-so-subtle criticisms of Marina's efforts. These family outings were less about togetherness and more about Marina playing the role of invisible servant, while Nina Vasilievna held court, basking in the adoration of her relatives. That sounds nice, Marina said, her voice carefully neutral, though her stomach churned with dread. Perfect. This Saturday, then, Nina Vasilievna declared, her tone brooking no argument. Everyone will be there. Our people, you know. It'll be such fun. Igor's already thrilled, and the children are so excited. You're not opposed, are you, dear? Marina bit her lip, her silence heavy with unspoken resentment. As always, her opinion wasn't being sought. It was assumed she'd fall in line, as she had for years. Of course not, she managed, the words tasting bitter. We'll come. Splendid, Nina Vasilievna chirped, her voice brimming with self-satisfaction. Be there by noon, and don't forget to prepare everything. Marinate the meat, chop some salads. You know how it goes. Without you, we'd all be lost. Understood, Marina said curtly, her throat tight with suppressed frustration. All right. See you soon, dear. Nina Vasilievna trilled before disconnecting. Marina lowered the phone, her hand trembling slightly. Our people, she thought, the phrase echoing bitterly in her mind. Our people, but never me. To Nina Vasilievna and Igor's family, she wasn't a member of the clan, not truly. She was the help, expected to cater to their every whim while her own needs, her own voice, went unheard. The Dacha trips were a microcosm of her life with Igor's family, a relentless cycle of demands, judgment, and exhaustion that left her feeling hollow. She stood in the hallway, staring at the faded wallpaper, its floral pattern a reminder of the life she'd been trapped in for over a decade. The apartment, cramped but tidy, was her sanctuary. Yet even here, the weight of her responsibilities pressed down on her. She was a wife, a mother, a daughter-in-law, roles that defined her, yet left little room for Marina, the woman with dreams and desires of her own. That evening, Igor came home from work, his face alight with a boyish excitement that only deepened Marina's unease. He kicked off his shoes, tossed his jacket over the couch, and bounded into the kitchen where Marina was rinsing dishes. "So, we're heading to Mom's dacha for shashlik, huh?" he said, grinning as he planted a quick kiss on her cheek. "She called you, right?" "She did," Marina confirmed, her voice flat as she scrubbed a plate with more force than necessary. "Awesome!" Igor clapped his hands, oblivious to her tension. "It's been forever since we had a proper family day. I'll make you a list of what we need to buy." He grabbed a notepad from a drawer and began scribbling, his pen moving with the careless confidence of someone who knew his demands would be met. Marina watched him, her heart heavy. She knew this routine by heart. Igor would list extravagant items, prime cuts of meat, expensive seafood, luxury ingredients, expecting her to foot the bill from her modest salary as a school administrator. She'd spend hours shopping, prepping, and cooking, only to be met with complaints that the shashlik was too dry or the salads too plain. Meanwhile, Igor would lounge with his relatives, basking in their praise, while Marina toiled in the background. "Here you go," Igor said, tearing off the sheet and handing it to her with a flourish. "Everything we need. Get the freshest pork for the shashlik, big shrimp, and don't forget the caviar, black and red. The kids love their caviar sandwiches." Marina took the list, her eyes scanning the items. 20 kilos of pork, 5 kilos of shrimp, black and red caviar, imported cheeses, premium wines, exotic fruits. The cost would easily swallow half her monthly earnings, money she'd been saving for a new phone, a small indulgence she'd dreamed of for months, a symbol of something just for her. She felt the familiar sting of resentment, sharp and raw. "And the money?" she asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Igor shrugged, already scrolling through his phone. "You're coming to the shashlik, aren't you? So chip in. You've got your little savings stash, right?" Marina stared at him, her chest tightening. He didn't even look up, didn't offer to cover a single ruble. To him, this was normal. Her role was to provide, to sacrifice, to make everything seamless for him and his family. She was his wife. Wasn't that her job? "Okay," she said, the word heavy with defeat. There was no point arguing. Igor wouldn't understand her frustration, her sense of being used. He saw her as an extension of himself, her needs secondary to his comfort. She retreated to the kitchen, her refuge in moments of turmoil, and pulled out the old tin can hidden behind a stack of cookbooks. Her stash was a meager collection of bills, painstakingly saved over months for that phone, a modest dream, a flicker of independence in a life consumed by others' demands. As she counted out the money, each bill felt like a piece of herself being chipped away. The unfairness of it burned, a slow, smoldering anger that threatened to spill over. But this time, something was different. A quiet resolve began to take shape, like a seedling pushing through cracked earth. Marina was tired of being the family's doormat, tired of Nina Vasilyevna's disdain, tired of Igor's casual disregard. She was done letting others define her worth. Her fingers trembled as she pulled out her phone and dialed her sister, Svetlana. "Svetka, hi," Marina said, her voice wavering but determined. "Marin, what's wrong?" Svetlana's voice was warm, laced with immediate concern. "You sound off." "I need your help," Marina said, tears pricking her eyes. "Can you, Mom, and Dad come to Nina Vasilyevna's dacha on Saturday and bring everything on this list I'm about to send you? Every single thing, down to the last detail." Svetlana paused, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. "The dacha? What's going on, Marin?" "I'll explain later," Marina said, her voice cracking with emotion. "Please, just do this for me." "All right, sis," Svetlana said after a moment, her tone softening. "We'll be there. Don't worry." Marina hung up, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. A strange mix of fear, anticipation, and defiance swirled inside her. She didn't know what Saturday would bring, but she knew one thing for certain: she was done being invisible. This weekend would mark the start of a new chapter, one where her voice mattered, where her labor was valued, where she was more than a servant to Igor's family. Saturday dawned crisp and clear, the air carrying the faint scent of autumn. Marina woke with an unfamiliar sense of calm, the usual pre-Dacha anxiety replaced by a quiet determination. She dressed with care, choosing a simple but elegant sweater and jeans that made her feel like herself, not the harried wife or dutiful daughter-in-law, but Marina, a woman with her own strength and desires. She woke her children, 10-year-old Sasha and 7-year-old Dacha, with gentle kisses, her heart swelling at their sleepy smiles. "Mom, why are we leaving so early?" Sasha mumbled, rubbing his eyes as they piled into the car, his hair still tousled from sleep. "You'll see, sweetheart," Marina said, a small smile playing on her lips. There was something new in her expression, a spark of confidence her children hadn't seen before, a quiet defiance that hinted at change. The drive to the dacha was quiet, the familiar countryside rolling past, fields of golden grass, clusters of birch trees, the occasional wooden house with smoke curling from its chimney. Marina's thoughts drifted to the years she'd spent in this cycle, the endless dacha trips, the weight of Nina Vasilievna's expectations, the way Igor took her sacrifices for granted. Each memory was a brick in the wall she'd built around her own happiness, and today she was ready to start tearing it down. They arrived at the dacha first, the sight of Nina Vasilievna's country house stirring a familiar pang of dread. The faded floral wallpaper, the heavy polished furniture, the crocheted doilies draped over every surface. It was a place frozen in time, a monument to routine and obligation. Nina Vasilievna greeted them at the door, her face set in its usual mask of disapproval, her lips pursed as if Marina's mere presence was an inconvenience. "You're early," she muttered, barely glancing at Sasha and Dacha. No warm hugs for her grandchildren, just a curt nod at Marina. "Couldn't sit still at home," Marina replied evenly, brushing past her into the house. She felt the weight of Nina Vasilievna's gaze but refused to let it unsettle her. Today was different. She wasn't here to appease or cower. The house smelled of stale air and old wood, the same as always. Marina set her bag down in the cramped guest room, her eyes lingering on the familiar details: the creaky floorboards, the chipped teacups on the shelf, the faded photo of Nina Vasilievna's late parents on the wall. This place had always felt like a cage, a reminder of her place in Igor's family. But today, she carried a quiet strength, a resolve to rewrite the script. Igor arrived an hour later, his face glowing with anticipation for the feast. He strode into the yard, clapping his hands together, his voice booming with enthusiasm. "So, where's the food, Marin?" "You know Mom doesn't like to wait." Marina met his eyes, her expression unreadable, a calm mask hiding the storm within. "I didn't buy anything," she said, her voice steady, each word deliberate. Igor froze, his jaw dropping as if she'd slapped him. "What do you mean you didn't buy anything? The shashlik, the shrimp, the caviar?" His voice rose, tinged with disbelief as he rattled off the list he'd given her, his hands gesturing wildly. "It'll all be here," Marina said cryptically, turning to gaze out the window at the empty road. Nina Vasilievna, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward, her lips pursed tighter than ever. "Marina, what is this nonsense? You know how much Igor loves his shashlik. You were supposed to handle everything." "I know," Marina said, her tone calm but firm, a steel edge beneath the softness. She felt the tension building inside her, a coiled spring ready to release, but she held her ground. As the minutes ticked by, Igor's impatience grew, his pacing leaving faint tracks in the dusty yard. Nina Vasilievna's complaints sharpened, her voice cutting through the air like a knife. "This is unacceptable, Marina. What are we supposed to eat? You can't just shirk your responsibilities." The children, sensing the unease, clung to Marina, their small hands gripping hers, their eyes wide with uncertainty. "Marina, I demand an explanation," Igor finally snapped, his face flushed with frustration. "Where's the food?" "Soon," Marina said simply, her eyes fixed on the horizon, her voice a quiet anchor in the storm. Then, the sound of tires crunching on gravel broke the silence. One car, then another, then a third pulled up to the Dacha, their engines humming in the crisp morning air. Marina's family, her parents, Svetlana, her husband, and their children, piled out, their arms laden with bags, boxes, and coolers. The courtyard soon overflowed with exactly the items from Igor's list: mounds of fresh pork, shrimp, black and red caviar, imported cheeses, vegetables, fruits, premium wines, even a gleaming new grill and bags of charcoal. "Hey, everyone!" Svetlana called, her voice bright as she enveloped Marina in a tight hug, her eyes sparkling with mischief and support. "We brought everything you asked for, Marin, down to the last detail." Marina's family bustled about, unloading their haul with cheerful efficiency. Her mother, Irina, beamed at the gathered crowd, her face radiant with warmth. "Thanks for the invite. We're so thrilled to spend the day together." Her father, Victor, carried a cooler of drinks, his deep laugh echoing across the yard as he teased Svetlana's husband about his questionable grilling skills. Igor and Nina Vasilievna stood frozen, their faces a mix of shock, irritation, and something akin to betrayal. They hadn't expected this, an invasion of Marina's family, turning their carefully controlled gathering into something chaotic, unfamiliar, and entirely out of their grasp. "What's going on here?" Igor finally managed, his voice tight as he turned to Marina, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What should have happened a long time ago," she replied, her voice steady, carrying a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The words felt like a release, a declaration of her newfound resolve. Svetlana, sensing the awkwardness, jumped in with a laugh, her voice light but deliberate. "Marina told us about the shashlik party, so we thought we'd pitch in. The more, the merrier, right? We couldn't let her do all the work alone." Marina took Sasha and Dacha by the hands and led them to a shaded bench under an ancient apple tree, its branches heavy with unripe fruit. She sat them down, her touch gentle but firm, and smiled. A real smile, not the strained one she'd worn for years. "Everything's going to be okay now," she whispered, her voice soft but certain. Her children looked up at her, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and trust, and her heart swelled with love. As her family set up tables, laid out food, and filled the air with laughter and chatter, Igor and Nina Vasilievna huddled to the side, whispering furiously. "What is this? Why are they all here?" Nina Vasilievna hissed, her voice low but venomous, her hands clenched into fists. "I don't know, Mom," Igor muttered, his voice thick with confusion and a hint of panic. "Marina's up to something. This isn't like her." Marina watched them from her wicker chair, a wave of relief washing over her like a warm tide. She wasn't their servant anymore. She was reclaiming her life, one defiant moment at a time. Sinking deeper into the chair, she tilted her face toward the sun, letting its golden warmth seep into her skin. For the first time at this Dacha, a place that had always felt like a prison, she felt free, unburdened, alive. Normally, she'd be darting between the kitchen and the grill, her hands stained with marinade, her brow damp with sweat, her mind racing to anticipate every need. She'd be chopping vegetables, flipping skewers, refilling drinks, all while fielding Nina Vasilievna's critiques and Igor's careless demands. Today, she sat still, savoring the sounds of her family's joy. Her mother shared a hilarious story about their neighbor's cat, her animated gestures drawing laughter from everyone. Her father teased Svetlana's husband, Alexei, about his dubious grilling technique, while the kids squealed as they chased each other across the lawn, their badminton rackets forgotten in the grass. Marina sipped homemade compote from a 3-liter jar her mother had brought, the cool, sweet liquid grounding her in the moment. She couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed so freely, her chest light with a joy she'd thought she'd lost. The air carried the scent of slightly burnt shashlik and undercooked shrimp, mingling with the earthy aroma of the nearby forest. Voices overlapped in a chaotic symphony. Nina Vasilievna's grumbling complaints, Igor's frustrated muttering as he tried to salvage the charred meat, the hushed gossip of Igor's relatives trying to make sense of the day's upheaval. "What's gotten into Marina?" one aunt whispered. "She's acting so strange." "I bet Igor pushed her too far," another replied, their voices carrying on the breeze. Marina tuned it all out. She was in her own world now, surrounded by people who loved her for who she was, not what she could do for them. Igor kept glancing at her, his eyes filled with confusion, irritation, and a hint of wounded pride. He was lost, unable to grasp why his compliant, predictable wife had disrupted his carefully ordered world. He'd always seen her as a fixture, reliable, uncomplaining, always ready to smooth over any discomfort. This new Marina, with her quiet strength and unyielding calm, unnerved him, shaking the foundation of his assumptions. Nina Vasilievna, meanwhile, flitted between the grill and the table, her face a mask of barely concealed fury. She was used to being the undisputed queen of these gatherings, her word law, her preferences sacrosanct. This chaos, Marina's family's laughter, their casual disregard for her authority, was an affront to her control. She muttered under her breath, her hands slicing through the air as she barked orders at Igor's cousins, who obeyed with reluctant shrugs. "Marina, why are you just sitting there?" Nina Vasilievna finally snapped, storming over with a plate of half-cooked shrimp, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Get up and help! This is your responsibility!" Marina met her mother-in-law's glare with a calm, unwavering gaze, her heart steady despite the familiar urge to appease. "I'm resting, Nina Vasilievna," she said, her voice soft but resolute. "My family came to enjoy the day too. We're not in the way, are we?" Nina Vasilievna's face twisted in disdain, her lips parting as if to unleash a tirade. But Marina turned away, her attention shifting to Sasha and Dacha, who were giggling over a game of tic-tac-toe scratched into the dirt. She wasn't going to be drawn into an argument. This was her day, her moment, and she wouldn't let anyone steal it. Whispers floated through the air, sharp and curious. Marina always did everything before. Is she upset about something? I bet Igor's been neglecting her. Maybe she's finally had enough. Marina heard every word, but let them slide off her like rain on glass. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. What mattered was the freedom coursing through her veins, the joy of being surrounded by her loved ones, the certainty that she was no longer invisible. Svetlana approached with a steaming cup of tea, her eyes soft with concern and pride. "You okay, Marin?" she asked, settling beside her sister on the bench. "Better than ever," Marina said, a genuine smile spreading across her face, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Thank you, Svetik. I couldn't have done this without you." "Don't mention it," Svetlana said, waving a hand dismissively, though her grin betrayed her affection. "We're family. We've got your back. Just be happy, okay? That's all I want for you." Marina hugged her sister tightly, her heart swelling with gratitude. She knew she could count on Svetlana, on her parents, on the people who saw her as more than a servant or a means to an end. Their love gave her strength, a foundation to stand on as she rebuilt her life. Igor made a tentative approach later, his steps hesitant as he sat beside Marina on the wicker chair. He took her hand awkwardly, his fingers clammy against her skin. "Marine, what's with the attitude?" he asked, his voice low, tinged with a mix of confusion and defensiveness. "What's going on? Why are you acting like this?" "I'm not sulking, Igor," she said, her voice steady, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning to dip, casting a golden glow over the fields. "Things are just different now." "Different how?" he pressed, his brow furrowing, his tone sharpening with frustration. "What does that even mean? You want me to buy the groceries myself now? Is that it?" Marina sighed, a quiet exhale of years of unspoken pain. She didn't want to fight, not today, but she needed him to hear her, even if he couldn't understand. "It's not about the groceries, Igor," she said, her voice firm but not unkind. "It's about being tired. Tired of being your family's servant, tired of your mother's constant criticism, tired of feeling like my efforts don't matter. I can't live like that anymore. I won't." Igor stared at her, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled to process her words. He'd always seen her as soft, accommodating, someone who'd bend over backward to keep the peace. This new Marina, confident, unyielding, speaking her truth without apology, terrified him. It challenged everything he'd taken for granted. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" he asked, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and disbelief, his eyes searching hers for the wife he thought he knew. Marina held his gaze, her eyes steady, searching his face for any sign of the man she'd once loved, the man she'd hoped would see her, truly see her. "I don't know yet," she said honestly, her voice soft but resolute. "But I'm not living like I used to. Not anymore." She stood, gently pulling her hand from his, and walked toward her family, who were packing up the tables and laughing over shared stories. Igor remained by the grill, his shoulders slumped, his face a mask of confusion and loss. He felt something slipping away, something he'd assumed was his by right, something he'd never truly valued until now. Marina's father was waiting by the car, his weathered face softening as he saw her approach. He wrapped her in a warm, bear-like hug, his arms a safe haven she'd always known. "You all right, kiddo?" he asked, his voice gruff but tender, his eyes searching hers. "Yes, Papa," she said, smiling, a spark of hope in her eyes. "It's just the beginning." She hugged her mother, her sister, kissed her children, their faces glowing with the carefree joy of a day spent with family. Their love, their support, was a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't alone. As they drove away, Marina glanced back at the Dacha, at the dark windows, at Igor's solitary figure by the dying embers of the grill. She felt no anger, no pity, just a profound relief, as if a weight she'd carried for years had finally lifted. At her parents' house, a warm dinner awaited, the cozy kitchen filled with the comforting aroma of fresh bread and roasted vegetables. Sasha and Dacha clambered onto their grandparents' laps, chattering excitedly about the day's adventures, their voices a joyful cacophony. Marina listened, her heart light, her worries melting away in the warmth of her family's presence. Later, as the children slept, Marina sat with her mother and Svetlana at the kitchen table, sipping tea from chipped mugs, the steam curling in the soft light. She poured out her heart, her words raw and unfiltered. "I'm done," she said, her voice steady, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to live for myself, for my kids. I want to be seen, valued, respected." "We're with you," her mother said, pulling her close, her embrace warm and unwavering. "You're stronger than you know, my girl. You always have been." "Always," Svetlana added, squeezing her hand, her eyes fierce with loyalty. "Whatever happens, we're here." Marina looked at them, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Their love, their belief in her, gave her the courage to face the unknown. The future was uncertain, divorce, new challenges, a life she'd have to build from scratch, but she knew one thing: she'd never go back to being used, belittled, invisible. She'd live on her terms, for her happiness, for the woman she was rediscovering within herself. That night, Marina stood by the window, gazing at the starry sky, its vastness both humbling and empowering. She felt small yet powerful, vulnerable yet grounded. Her family, her children, her newfound belief in herself, they were enough. She climbed into bed, the soft creak of the mattress a familiar comfort, and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep, free of nightmares, free of guilt, free of the weight of others' expectations. The next morning, Marina woke to a sense of lightness, as if the world had shifted overnight. The sun streamed through the curtains, casting golden patterns on the wooden floor. Her mother was in the kitchen, humming an old folk song as she flipped pancakes, the scent of butter and batter filling the air. "Morning, sweetheart," she said, smiling, her eyes crinkling with warmth. "Sleep well?" "Better than ever," Marina replied, stepping to the window to greet the sunny day. She felt a quiet certainty, a spark of hope that hadn't been there before. A new life stretched before her, one filled with love, freedom, and choices she'd make for herself. She was ready to embrace it, to write her own story, to be the woman she'd always known she could be. As she sipped her coffee, watching her children chase each other in the backyard, Marina felt a smile tug at her lips. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was hers to walk. She'd face it with courage, with love, with the strength she'd found within herself.